All right, let's talk quickly about line type, and then we'll jump into this line type sampler project, okay? So big picture overview, when we think about line, it's mostly a communication strategy, okay? So we're using line in our drafting to emphasize what's important and also to communicate different types of objects, okay? So what you're seeing right now on the screen is a copy of the USITT line type standards. So this is what USITT has designated as which types of lines indicate which different meanings in a drafting project, okay? So you'll see mostly there are thick lines, there are thin lines, and then there are various additional notes that are around those line types. We are going to work on a bunch of those different line types in this assignment. Okay, so this is a good practice, both on the way we construct a drafting and also how we create these different types of lines that indicate these different concepts when we're drafting a project. So you can take a look at this and use it as a reference. It gives you some good indications of what would be expected and also how you're going to read a drawing. You can use line types beyond these and line weights beyond these to further clarify your drawing. So if you're doing something that is where you're trying to indicate something that is a detail or that is less important than the object line, you can add those things in, and we'll typically use a lighter either line weight, so either a thinner line or a lighter line when we're drafting by hand. So some other things to consider and to think about and keep in mind, right, are these line quality items that are listed in chapter 4. So we want to emphasize the beginning and ends of lines. We don't want our lines to sort of trail off. We want to like push our pencil down in order to start and end a line with clarity, because that's how we are specific in what we're doing, okay? You want your corners, right, to end exactly meeting. You don't want a corner where it doesn't connect or where your lines just overlapped and keep going, okay? Not cute, not what we want about our lives, okay? There are some other things to keep in mind, right, about line quality. So that stuff is all listed here. We, in old school drafting, right, this idea that you would ink your drawing at the end was the goal, right? And so you would think about construction lines, which are lines that are not part of the final drawing, in a different way in that case, because originally hand draftings and vellum as a material in particular were intended to be run off on a blueprint machine, and on that blueprint machine, those lightest lines would not be reproduced. So you're really only getting your thicker lines, your heavier lines, and then your thinner lines as the finish line, right? As the lines that'll be reproduced. So that's part of why when we think about line, we start by drafting with a lighter pencil as a draft, and then we come back in and go over those lines with a heavier pencil as the final line for the project. See what else we want to worry about, right? I'll talk a little bit about this. This is how you align your page onto your drafting surface. If you already have those materials, go ahead and start using your T-square now. And if not, you can make it work for this project using just your triangles, because we are not drafting a full sheet border, and I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, for this point, for this one. For the next one, you'll need all your stuff. Yeah. And then we already did the Starburst assignment, so we already have that concept, but it's not going to be in this equation, okay? We're also using scale for this drawing, so if you have any questions about scale, that's also listed here in addition to those resources that we did in terms of measuring scale on this project. Okay, So I think that's a good start in terms of what I'm talking about when I talk about line weight. And now I'm gonna jump over to my actual drafting plate and talk you through this line type sampler assignment where we will practice these various types of lines. Great. All right, you guys, here we go. This is my line type sampler that I've printed out. You can just keep yours up on your screen. And here's the set of tools I'm using in this particular case, okay? So I have a regular mechanical pencil with HB lead in it. That's the kind you use to fill in your Scantrons on the SAT. And then I have another mechanical pencil, and mine has the 3H lead. So that is a harder than usual lead type, okay? If you don't have this lead, and I also, 4H is probably what I recommended that you buy. You can also use your drawing pencil that you would have gotten with your drawing kit, and you just need to keep a super sharp tip point on it so that it doesn't become thicker than your final lines, because this is the pencil we're using to do our preparation lines and our construction lines in this drawing. So if you notice, I tested out right on the piece of paper that is my assignment sheet. This is so light, the camera is barely even picking it up, if it's picking it up at all. Yeah, no, this one is so light that the camera's not really picking it up. So I'll use the 3H so that you have a chance of seeing it instead of the 4H pencil. But the nice thing about it, right, is that in addition to being so light that the camera, or in the case of a real drafting, the copy machine wouldn't pick it up, it also erases very, very easily compared to a heavier line weight like, or a heavier graphite like the HB. Okay. So we are drawing two shapes. We're drawing a rectangle with a center line, and we're drawing a square with 3 dashed lines inside of it, okay? You will notice if you're able to print this out that there are different line weights in the drawing. Your object lines there are the heaviest, and then your dashed lines and your dimension lines are lighter, and this is standard in drafting, okay? You do not need to do a title block on this particular plate. And if you have a full sheet, you're welcome to go horizontal the way that I am and just do the rectangle on the left and the square on the right and call it a day. I'm going to move this now out of the way, but I'll bring it back as I talk about each individual one, or I'll do like a close-up screenshot on camera as I talk about each individual shape. Okay, so setting up a drawing on your drawing board. I am going to use my T-square for this. I do have my T-square and my 2 triangles handy. Triangles. I'm using them for this project. If you happen to have a spare sheet of the white paper, like the one that I wrapped all of your drawings in, or the whatever, the handouts in, that's flat, and that's the problem, right? I think I folded them. It's nice to do a mat underneath your final plate, because it'll give you a little cushion to draw on. If you got one of our drafting boards from school, I'm sorry, I keep looking at the screen instead of at the camera. Getting used to this new setup. If you got one of the drafting boards from school, it has a nice Vico cover on it. So it has that like green rubbery cover, which is nice. It's like soft and it holds the pencil better. You can also just use paper, right? You could use like a couple layers of newsprint or something like that, and then a clean sheet of vellum as your paper pad. I'm not doing it right now, but that's something you can do. And you would just tape down each of those pieces individually underneath your final sheet. So let's do this. The way we align our sheet to the board is important because that determines that the page is square to the T-square, and the T-square gives you those perfect horizontal. So the way you would go about this task of aligning, this is going to be my life now, you guys. Here we go. So to align our sheet to our surface, we start at a top corner, Okay. And we want to get it as close as we can to being square at that top corner. So we start at a top corner. We hold our T-square. We get the page nice and square along that line so it's matching up on our T-square. I have to like stick my head all up in your business. Sorry, y'all. In order to align it there. Okay. And then we want to make sure it stays aligned. Right, so it's very close to being perfectly aligned. And this is while we're holding the T-square square to the edge of our drafting surface. I'm gonna keep it staying aligned across, right? I'm gonna hold the piece of paper, slide the T-square down just a little bit, and get that corner attached, right? So now I'm perfectly lined up across that top edge. And then you can just pull your T-square down, right? That will make sure that the paper is flat to the drafting surface. So you'll just pull it down, smooth it out, and affix your bottom corners with a couple drafting dots as well. Okay. Boom. Plate is adhered. Great. So now I know if I'm drawing a horizontal line, I can trace on this T-square and it will be perfectly horizontal. And if I need a vertical line, I can use a triangle to get that perfect vertical line. And we're gonna use that for both shapes in this. Okay, so we're gonna look at this now. Let's do our rectangle. 5'6" by 4'6" with a center line. That's our goal. The first thing we'll do is draw those construction lines, and we'll do it with our lighter lead. So I'm using 3H, you should use 4H for this. You'll get out your lovely scale rule. Right? Boom. So you can look at the fact that that first rectangle is in 1/4 inch scale. You find the 1/4 inch side of your ruler, and you know that 4'6" is about this big, right? It's very small. 4'6", right? So I'm going to, because I actually want both of these, I'm doing this side by side, I'll have both of these start on the same horizontal line and come up off of the same horizontal line. So I'm going to just very lightly give myself a guide over here for that 4'6" rectangle. I'm going to keep my T-square in exactly the same space, and I'm going to come over here, and you're noticing I'm drawing like a weirdo, right? So I have my pencil straight up and down, and I'm just very lightly giving myself a guide for this 6-foot rectangle over here. Okay, you can barely see them in the camera. The line weight is not perfectly even. That's okay. A lot of this is going to get erased. Okay, so now on my 4'6" line, I'm going to come in with my 1/4 inch scale rule situation. I'm going to measure my 4 feet, put a mark for myself, and then measure that 6 inches past the 0, put a mark for myself there. Can't see them, invisible. That's okay for you. So now I have those 2 marks. Those are going to be where the verticals come in, okay? So now I take my T-squares still square to the edge, right? My triangle doesn't have to be up at this line because I have a T-square, and that helps me because it means I can start and stop my line exactly where I want to. So I'm going to line my pencil up over that hash mark so that it sits right on top of that horizontal line. And I'm gonna just give myself that light vertical, right? You can barely see it, but it's there. That vertical line, I can then duplicate that over here, right? So I know that's 4'6" away, okay? And then I will measure using my scale rule the 5'6" that this moves up above that edge. Okay, again, I'm lining it up, and you kind of have to like stick your head right over the scale rule to do this. I'm lining it up, and I'm getting that 5'6" mark, okay? To strike that line, I can move my T-square right up here so that it would be 1 pencil width, and I draw and I stop right at that line. Okay, so now all of those lines are drawn. At this point, I'm gonna take my eraser shield and my eraser, and I'm going to erase all the parts of those lines that I do not need in my drawing, okay? So it's just this rectangle. So that's my first shape drawn, right? If I want to, I can use the cute brush to keep that drawing clean. It's very, very light, all right? While I'm here, while I'm using my 4H lead, or 3H in this case, lead, I am going to go ahead and do the same basic outline for my 6-foot square using 1/2 scale instead of 1/4 scale, because if you look at your drawing, it says scale equals 1/2 equals 1 foot, 0 inches. So 6 feet and 1/2 scale. Dust away. Okay, so now I have little square, big square. Great, wonderful. I'm going to go back in and add in some measuring marks for all of these individual lines, right? So I'm just gonna give myself a reference measuring across as to where those lines are happening so that I can come back in and do them precisely later. So on this guy, it's a center line. So that means at 2'3" is the vertical where that line will happen. And if I was blueprinting this, I might even trace in that line very lightly and then come back with that heavier lead. But I'm gonna just do this as a marker, just so I have a very, very light center point. And then going up the edge on this 6 foot, I have 4 segments. So that's every 18 inches in 1/2 scale. I'm gonna just give myself marks on just this vertical edge that I can then go back and work from with my T-square. Great. So now I have 3 little dots on that edge. This is fun for you, right? Because it's invisible, you can't see at all what's happening. Great. Okay, so now that I have all of these guidelines built for myself, I'm going to come back in, I'm going to use my heavier pencil, okay? This is where life gets tricky. You want to think about your drawing systematically, right? So for example, I look at when I'm coming in to do my final lines, right? So for example, on this drawing, I'm looking at it from top to bottom so that I'm not rubbing my T-square over a section that is already drawn. And because I'm doing that, I need to start with my 6 inch because it's taller. I need to shove a bunch of things out the way. A bunch of tools all up in my business. So I'm gonna start with horizontal lines and then I'll come back and do vertical lines. And as I go across, the first thing I'm gonna do, stick my head right over the thing again so that I can line it up so it's exactly where it happens, and then I'm just practicing evenly drawing a line that starts and stops at the correct spot. And luckily this T-square has a nice transparent leg so I can see my pencil, right? Great. So that's my top edge line. Now, I have 2 different dashed line situations. This is where the practicing line types comes in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this dashed line with the short dashes, or with the dashes with short spaces, and then I'll do a dashed line with longer spaces for that center section. And this is just a practice thing. So do your dang best, and it'll be great. Well, we do our best. And then we come back in and do the same smaller dashed lines. Oops, actually, what? Over here, I have that horizontal line. It's a little bit lower than this line for my little rectangle. So I'm gonna go over here and do that now. Now, vertical lines. And I do have a little situation right here. Do you see that? See that little booger? I can just come in and erase exactly just that spot using that little center section of my eraser shield. Oh, much better. Okay. If I can get this thing off of there. All right. So now vertical lines, I'm using my triangle because I am right-handed. I'll go across this way. So my triangle is sitting on my drawing, but not on the part that is that has the vertical lines in it already. And because I have this nice soft HB lead going already, I want to be super careful not to smudge. So I'm going to pick up and set down my triangle in between each line in order to accomplish that. So I'm going to slide my T-square down a little bit to give myself some room to work. And we're going to do a center line that meets up with that hash that I gave myself in the beginner. So a center line is a long dash, short dash, alternating line. I mean, it's not my best center line ever, but it's all right. Now I'm going to come in and strike these other two edge lines on this guy. Cool. So those are my shapes. I do have that one little smudge there to deal with. Pretty close to being gone. Obviously, it's a lot harder to get rid of it because it's an HB mistake instead of a 4H mistake. Okay, so those are our shapes. We're gonna add in dimension lines and we're gonna do those with our harder pencil. So if you have like a 2H, that would be awesome. The 3H that I used before is going to work just fine for this, okay? So dimension lines are a lighter line weight than both your object lines and your other descriptor lines. And the key with dimension lines is that they don't intersect with your objects at all. So you want to keep the dimensions about a 1/16 of an inch off the edge of your object. And you'll, again, want to be really careful to keep this as clean as possible. So sliding your T-square around is not in your best interest in this case. And the same with your triangle. You want to lift it up as much as you can remember to do because it'll get that graphite on the bottom of it and become smudgy land, and that's not our favorite thing. You can also use an extra sheet of paper if you're worried about it and like cover part of a drawing. So like if I was working on this half and I didn't want to mess up this half, I could like put a sheet of paper over it temporarily just to protect it from my hands and my tools. So I'm gonna come over here now and let's just do the dimension lines. So we're just gonna pull this line out off of that edge, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I'm gonna do the same thing with this guy, so he's also getting a dimension line. And with his top edge. Okay. Good enough. So neither of these are touching, okay? And they're both pulled off to the side. They're also not super even. C'est la vie. So now I'm going to use my triangle to create the dimension line. So I'm gonna just start up here at the top, leave a gap for the measurement, and then continue down to the bottom dimension line. Same thing over here. So the other things that you may still want to do, because you're going to do a little bit of lettering, which will be the heights of these, or the lengths of these various dimensions, is this is a good time to give yourself some very, very light guides using the lightest pencil that you have above and below where those letters would go so that you have a space to fill in. And similarly, if you want to add a drawing label, so if you want to do the 1 and the 2, you can draw that in as well. And just give yourself very light guides that you can go back and work from. I'm going to skip that for now. So I'm just going to freehand my letters because I feel like it. Be bold, Lily, whatever. I'm also going to add in my arrowheads on my dimension lines with my HB pencil. This is a case, right, where I'm about to set my hand on top of a nice drawing and I don't want to smudge it, so I'm just putting a piece of paper as a protector. And drawing in filled arrowheads on those dimension lines. That's a trash arrowhead. I draft with a computer. La 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 la. Okay. That's the project. We did it. Ta-da.